bridging the gap. That's the energy and that's the whole vibe. And I love it. Brilliant and beautiful, I think, as a project and as an undertaking. My name is Khomotso Letwaba. I am originally from South Africa, Johannesburg, and I currently stay in South Africa, Johannesburg. I think there was a period where it was obviously, uh, very obviously exclusive. Like black people just in this country just did not have access to the country, on an economic level, on a political level, social level, just access, even freedom of just movement, and all those restrictions, I think, have maybe created a kind of consciousness whereby I would say the older generation very much understand apartheid, like hardcore. Like they understand it like hunger, like that feeling of being hungry. Like it's very real, it's very visceral, and it's got like emotions attached to it.
My name is Bola. You can just call me Bola, basically. I'm from Nigeria originally, and I live in Cape Town. Yeah, I actually came here solely to study. And okay, so first of all, I'm not South African, so I didn't grow up in South Africa. I came to South Africa in 2013, so like a black foreigner in South Africa, particularly in Cape Town, because Cape Town is very different. Cape Town has a very different, or let me say Western Cape, because Western Cape is the province and Cape Town is like the major city in Western Cape. I don't know about African Americans, because you grew up or you were born in the struggle, and I think in that way, you share a lot of things with South Africans, with Black South Africans. They are born in the struggle, in being black in certain areas and trying to fit in other areas. That freedom, that policing of blackness, of both in every area, intellectually, physically, socially, policing blackness, trying to make sure blackness complies to whiteness or is, assimilates into whiteness. And that struggle, I think, it has had a kind of, it has shaped black South African experience in a way that I
Name is Yeye too, but people call me Yeye. With regard to that question, I would say that some of the barriers are challenges with identity, loss of culture and tradition. I think oftentimes as Black South Africans, we forget about the Bantu expansion. I forget that in terms of like my lineage, I'm either from Central Western African descent, and so I'm not originally from South Africa in terms of like location. And as an African in South Africa, a lot of our culture, a lot of our just cultural norms and language is very borrowed. I hear a lot of guys say, I'm an African, and I'm just like, okay. I think that that narrative of being an African is a little bit challenging sometimes, so I think that would probably be like, not like a barrier, but I think it's definitely something to note that as a South African, it almost feels like we're the separate entity from a lot of other African countries. South Africa feels like this, I don't know, separate, developed country on the continent, and our identity is not as integrated as it should be, considering, our history as Black people. I live in the Free State, which is one of the provinces in South Africa. I know in America they call it states, but we have provinces. So I live in a province called, or a state called, the Free State. I live in I would say like a small city called Bloemfontein in a township called Rocklands, aka, you know, township is like aka for the hood, aka for the ghetto, aka for Kasi, aka for vacation, loction, um, aka for, ramifications of apartheid. Rocklands doesn't have, I don't actually know where that name comes from. It's not like, we're in the land of rocks. There are no rocks here. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. They were both freedom fighters. They dated, they got married, had kids, they got divorced. I'd like to think for myself that Winnie Madikizela Mandela, I don't know anything. I'm gonna go into my history about that. Because now I feel like all of these questions are making me think about that. But I'd like to think for myself, Winnie Madikizela Mandela left Nelson, perhaps because she thought that he was kind of making the fight a little bit easy, and Nelson Mandela is ahead of his time, considering the fact that, yeah, like a rainbow nation, this idea of like kumbaya and everybody coming together is great, but in terms of like what's on the floor and what's happening on the ground, I think that his ideologies weren't really beneficial for the people living in this country, the black people and people of color in this country. As women are queens. I like to think that they had varying opinions about how freedom should come in this country. I like to think that Winnie Madikizela was ruthless and unforgiving in her approach, and yeah, maybe she left him because of that. Like, don't sell out my people or I'll dump your ass. And then she dumped his ass.
Was Nelson an agent? If you consider the fact that Nelson Mandela actually spent a large portion of the apartheid movement in prison, only coming out towards the end and having been arrested quite early within the more critical, like later conflicts and stages of the movement, when the ANC got banned and everything like that, a lot of what the ANC needed in terms of implementation, execution on the ground, on the outside, Mandela couldn't actually fulfill. Yes, he was the heartbeat, and yes, mentally and maybe even strategically, he's been heavily involved. But then when it came down to it, he couldn't really enact. A lot of people don't understand about Winnie is that when Nelson Mandela couldn't do it because he wasn't around, she did it. She was there. She was around. She was part of the conversation and the movement, and she was pushing it and driving it forward from the ground. And I think that's a very beautiful sentiment to understand just how important she was to the movement. I mean, the question of whether or not Nelson Mandela was an agent is just a question on what people expect, between, and it's that break. I don't think it can be expected of Mandela to completely remove South African wealth from white hands into black hands, do that peacefully, do that without the involvement of, you know, first world governments like Europe and America, in that they are inadvertently invested in whatever happens in our country. He wouldn't really be able to truly unlock the country without like a civil war, conflict of some nature. I think that's something that maybe some people don't appreciate, is just the strategy in being able to hold back and being able to set up what's important so that the movement can actually have the legs necessary to carry through. And I think if he was an agent, it's hard to say because you are an agent of something. Are you the agent of destruction? Are you the agent of white money? Are you the agent of like black dis you know black poverty? What are you the agent of? So when people say someone's an agent, does it mean like espionage, serving a bigger authority? Then in that case, a lot of people need to admit that the definition of agencies and agents needs to also be wider because we are working for multinational conglomerate companies. We're agents ourselves. We're agents of monopolization, agents of capitalism. And yet we go home and we tweet and we write status updates about how we're against all of that. And then we wake up in the morning and hit our 9 to 5, which serves just that. So it's very complicated what we mean when we say someone's an agent because in our own small way everyone's an agent of something, so we need to just identify what he's really being put on trial for. Not he ran and then passed on the baton. He only served 1 term, then he passed it on, and the next person to take it needs to also run their best and then pass it on. And that's how I see presidency. And I think it's unfair for people to expect him to run the entire 400 meters when it's actually supposed to be a 100-meter dash and then he passes it on to the next. So yeah, that's my opinion.